asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv.
James O'Brien is a presenter. Well, he is a presenter. He's not a journalist, but he's a presenter anyway. At the very least, he's a presenter. And he works for LBC Radio in London. He presents, I think, a mid-morning programme. I'm going to refrain from saying too much about O'Brien, but I am going to play a monologue from him. A monologue from his programme earlier today. And it was sent to me by Stephen Kite. Thank you, Stephen. I wouldn't have seen it because I do spend a lot of time on national radio. It's usually BBC 4, BBC 5, and then television news, BBC, Sky and Channel 4. I don't bother too much with LBC. LBC isn't doing as well as it would like its advertisers to believe, or as it would like, I should say, its audience to believe. It brags a lot about leading Britain's conversation, but it doesn't have a very big audience nationally, and it's just a lot of hot air, like its presenters, basically. O'Brien wanted to link Putin and the poisoning with the necessity to stay in the European Union. And he also wanted to make the point, did James O'Brien, that people who don't believe that Putin poisoned Sergei Skripal, well, those people are likely to be tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorists. This is about 3 minutes and 40 seconds long. I'm not going to play it in one go for you. I'm going to dissect it as we go along, just for the crack. It is a Thursday. We are approaching the weekend. St. Patrick's Day is nigh. It's nearly here. So let's have a listen to James O'Brien then. Again, thanks to Stephen for sending me this. James O'Brien, LBC.
I think what amazes me most is the smile that Vladimir Putin must have on his face when he hears people who've grown up with all of the benefits of Western liberal democracy somehow choosing his side against their own country.
Well, I'm going to stop him there. People who have grown up with the benefits of Western liberal democracy, would he like to tell that to people who have got to go to PIP assessment hearings and be humiliated by private companies hired by central government and by local authorities to humiliate them, demean them, treat them like second-class citizens and force them to live in fear of losing heat and light because they can't afford to pay for it tomorrow or the day after? Is that what he's talking about? Liberal democracy? Is he talking about the young men and women of the armed services who are sent off to fight in illegal wars where they are either killed or injured, or they are forced to kill, to torture and to maim the poorest people in the Middle East? Is that what he's talking about? Western liberal democracies? Is he talking about this country where people's livelihoods have been destroyed through membership of the European Union? Is that what he's talking about? The benefits of liberal democracy? And taking Putin's side, he said there, didn't he? Who's taking Putin's side? I'm not taking Putin's side. I'm just asking as a real journalist, and of course my qualifications, my academic qualifications, which don't mean anything, by the way, don't get me wrong here. I've said this before and I don't mean it, but my academic qualifications are absolutely untouchable compared to Muppet James O'Brien and his colleagues. If they want to play this game about, who's got the qualifications, I'm a real journalist. James O'Brien isn't. He's a puppet. He's a state puppet. I would say I'm not on Putin's side. I want to see the evidence. Where is the evidence that Vladimir Putin attacked Sergei Skripal? O'Brien's monologue goes from the sublime to the absolute ridiculous here.
Quite incredible. A lot of you commented on it yesterday, and this show was nowhere near the best example of the brainwashing that's been undertaken. And you've got to...
What brainwashing is he talking about? Brainwashing. In fact, what O'Brien is lamenting here, this is beautiful, this is an inversion. O'Brien is actually lamenting the fact that people are not being brainwashed. It's a wonderful inversion, isn't it? Look at all the brainwashing going on. In fact, it's the opposite. People are starting to wake the feck up. People are starting to say, come on. Come on. How many times are you going to tell us the same old shit before we say, do you know something? It's the same old shit. You invent a bad guy. You make all manner of accusations against him. You want to punish him, and you want to change our society as a result of your accusations against him, and as a result of your claims that he represents a clear and present threat to UK security. So people aren't being brainwashed. The people who don't believe the BBC and who don't believe LBC about Putin. It's a wonderful inversion here. It's the opposite. It's actually evidence that the brainwashing isn't working. Let's hear a bit more from James O'Brien.
You've got to remember, the people that lead these narratives are the same people that describe the Sandy Hook massacre as a hoax.
Well, hey! The people who refuse to believe their tyrannical, filthy, corrupt, Zionist-occupied government, by the way, are the same people who think that Sandy Hook is a hoax. Well, of course, that's not true. That isn't true. There's no evidence to support the fact that those who refuse to condemn Vladimir Putin because there is no evidence also believe that Sandy Hook was a hoax. Bollocks. Of course, if O'Brien really wants to talk about Sandy Hook, he could invite Wolfgang Halbig on his programme. But he wouldn't do that, would he? To find out why a Florida state trooper, why a National Schools Safety Inspections officer has asked some very salient questions about Sandy Hook in Connecticut. But that's a totally different thing. To compare people who don't believe the newspapers about Putin with Sandy Hook questioners, and to say that they're basically as mad as a box of frogs, this is despicable, and it is an affront to journalism. This monologue by O'Brien, it's garbage. It's absolute garbage, this. But there you are.
A hoax. They're the same people who argue that fruit juice cartons have been impregnated with a special chemical designed to make children gay. They're the...
Who's ever said that fruit juice cartons have been impregnated with a chemical to make children gay? I've been doing conspiracy research. Well, I shouldn't say that. I've been interviewing conspiracy researchers for years. And I've been doing it longer than a lot of people. Maybe not longer than most people, but a lot of people. Help me out there, listener, but I don't remember anybody ever saying fruit juice cartons are being impregnated with a chemical to make children gay. That being said, Alex Jones became so batshit crazy, he might have said that, right? I don't know, but I've never heard anybody say that. Gets more interesting, though.
Same people who think that the vapor trails behind aeroplanes are all part of a government plan to brainwash us. Those...
Well, hey, the same people who think that vapor trails behind planes are part of a government plan to brainwash us. I don't believe in coincidences, and I don't believe that O'Brien was engaged in a stream of consciousness there. He very deliberately alluded to geoengineering there. Why would he do that? I don't know why. Is it because more and more people again are becoming aware of the fact that what they are looking at in their skies are not in fact contrails at all? They're not. Listen to Piers Corbyn, meteorologist, qualified man, brother of the leader of the Labour Party. Piers has talked about these things not being contrails. They cannot be. Water vapour dissipates in minutes. Let's just say water vapour takes 20 minutes to dissipate at high altitude. It doesn't. It dissipates far quicker. These things even, they fatten out, they broaden out, and they leave the sky covered in a haze, a sheen, a milky white kind of a mist that doesn't go away and covers the sky and turns a gloriously blue-skied sunny day into a kind of a greyish day which the sun isn't penetrating. Why would he mention geoengineering, I wonder? Remember, he's talking now about people who don't take it at face value when their government tells them that Putin is the greatest bastard of all time and he tried to kill the Russian spy. And he's introduced Sandy Hook and he's introduced chemtrails. Yeah. I wonder.
People that have done Vladimir Putin's bidding in this country and in America.
These are the same people who have done Vladimir Putin's bidding here and in America. Who has done Vladimir Putin's bidding here and in America? Outside of Russian colleagues of Putin's, I'm sure Putin has lobbyists like every other country in the UK and in the United States. I'm sure the Russian government has a lobby, oligarchs, billionaires working within various countries to their own benefit. That's just the way it goes. But I mean, Russia would be Accrington Stanley compared to Israel's Manchester City or Manchester United in terms of lobbying, right? So who's doing Putin's bidding in the US and in the UK? This is absolute fucking bollocks by James O'Brien. This is the worst of the worst. Worst even. This is the worst type of garbage that you could expect to hear from any national presenter. This is woefully inept. It is the crappiest of the crap. Nothing makes any sense here. Just a load of crap linking chemtrails and Sandy Hook with people who won't believe the intelligence agencies of the UK. Why should they? We talked at length with Ray McGovern as to why they shouldn't believe the intelligence agencies of this country and the United States. What else does O'Brien have to say?
In America, and the success of that project must have amazed even them. It's all in Mein Kampf. It's all there. Treat people as if...
Jesus Christ. We heard this yesterday from Tom Tugendhat, the Zionist MP, who told BBC Radio 5 Live, basically, that we heard it from John Sweeney from Panorama, who told BBC Radio 5 Live that Putin was effectively Hitler and that Russia today resembles 1933 Germany. Tom Tugendhat told the BBC that they weren't fair and balanced because they played a clip of the former MP Sergei Markov saying that the allegations against Russia were spurious. So now he's engaging in this, O'Brien. He's bringing Mein Kampf into it, Hitler. What O'Brien is actually saying is that Putin is Hitler and that those who don't believe that he poisoned Skripal are effectively Nazis. This is what this guy is saying on national radio today. That being said, I must refer to my previous remarks. They don't have a big audience at all.
They are incredibly stupid. Give them a couple of meaningless slogans, a sense of certainty when confronted with complicated issues, and they will do your bidding.
Let's hear that again.
Although I don't. Incredibly stupid.
Listen to what he says here. This is very interesting. He talks about Mein Kampf. He makes this. He makes this analogy with Mein Kampf, and he says that Putin effectively uses the tool of assuming that people are mega stupid and that no matter what you tell them, they'll believe it. But what he says next is very interesting.
Stupid. Give them a couple of meaningless slogans, a sense of certainty when confronted with complicated issues.
Give them some meaningless slogans. Give them some slogans. And use those slogans as a way of shaping their understanding of complicated issues. Meaningless slogans. What about the axis of evil? What about that as a meaningless slogan? What about it's a brutal regime? What about that as a meaningless slogan to change somebody's understanding or to affect somebody's understanding of a complicated issue? The Syrian government, it's an autocratic regime. That's not perfect. It's no worse than the system we have here, by the way, the sham democracy we have here, which I've gone into too many times in this program to repeat now. But they've tried to explain Syria through meaningless slogans like a brutal, oppressive regime. That's a slogan. Weapons of mass destruction. That was a slogan. It was all nonsense. He's a real beauty, this guy James O'Brien, isn't he?
And they will do your bidding. Donald Trump understands that, although I don't think he's ever read a book, let alone...
Donald Trump has never read a book. No, I don't like Donald Trump. You've heard this programme too many times to know that I don't like left, right, alt-right, alt-left, far right, far left. I've no time for any of them. It's all an illusion. It's all a game to continue to get people to continue living the lives that we live, in the belief that we are masters of our own destiny. When we go to the ballot box, we can change. We can't. But to be saying things like Trump has probably never read a book, he's not fit to present a programme on national radio, irrespective of whether he believes he's got a big audience or not. And he doesn't have a big audience. I take great delight in pointing this out. It's nonsense. They have no reach, these organisations. Their reach is compared to what they allege is their audience, it's nothing. What they do, all of these stations, is they take the radar data and they manipulate the data to make it look like they've got hundreds of thousands of listeners, when in fact they don't. They do not. The Nationals still have pretty big audiences. Breakfast on BBC 4, BBC Radio 2, BBC Radio 5, big audiences. Drive Time on the BBC channels have got pretty big audiences, but the likes of LBC, they can call themselves what they want. They do not have a big market share. They're bullshitters. That's a fact. I know this to be a fact. Absolutely dreadful for him to be making allegations that Trump never read a book.
He just gets it. He gets it in an intuitive way. And Vladimir Putin also gets it in an intuitive way. What I didn't get until the last couple of years was how many people choose to be stupid and ignorant and ill-informed. And once you've gone down that road, because...
Well, you see, people are not choosing to be stupid, to be ignorant and to be ill-informed. Again, we're back to the inversion. People are choosing not to believe people like James O'Brien. And James O'Brien doesn't like it. I understand that O'Brien gets very frustrated when the phone lines to his programme are open, because the majority of those who call into his programme disagree with this garbage, these monologues, and they take him on, and he's increasingly frustrated by this. Why are people not listening? Because, James, they are not brainwashed. It is the opposite. They are fed up with stooges like you, establishment whores, who get their positions and their jobs because they will parrot the establishment narrative. That is what you will do. People are fed up of it. So they get increasingly frustrated, these guys. Why won't people listen to me? Because, mate, you are just the latest version of a useless automaton presenter. You're the latest version, like the new iPhone or the new Samsung phone. You're just the latest. Might look a bit shinier than the previous version, but it just does the same fucking thing. It just makes phone calls, sends text messages, scans your fingerprints and takes photographs. You're just the latest in a long line of bullshitters. And people are fed up with the bullshit. They're being fed up of being told what to think by the likes of you. They're fed up of being insulted by the likes of you, because they don't believe you're garbage, because you haven't the courage to question the narrative as a presenter, because you are a worthless human being. You haven't the balls to ask Boris Johnson or Theresa May or Philip Hammond, listen, will you do us a favour? Will you give us some evidence there that Vladimir Putin's government or the FSB were behind a Skripal poisoning? Because if you do, I will broadcast that. If you show me irrefutable evidence, I will do my duty and I will inform my audience, because, Mrs. May, I am here to inform my audience. I cannot lie to them. I cannot infer to my audience that Putin was involved unless I know for a fact that he was. Can't do that. So you've got to convince me, Mrs. May. And I'm not buying it that easily, Mrs. May, because I remember Libya. I remember the lies told about Libya, about Gaddafi, about Gaddafi's plans, about Gaddafi killing his own people, about moderate rebels, of which there were none. There were just lunatic jihadists in Libya. So I'm not going to believe you, Mrs. May, or Mr. Hammond, or whatever her name is, Amber Rudd. You gotta convince me. You convince me and I'll convince the audience. That's the way it should work. No.
Because life is complicated and reality is confusing, and it's very tempting, I guess, to pretend that it isn't. And also, of course, to blame all the things that have gone wrong in your life on some fella from Poland or Pakistan. I guess that's very...
So now you're racist as well. So if you disagree with the conduct of the media in reporting the Sergei Skripal alleged poisoning, you're likely to be a Sandy Hook hoaxer believer. You're likely to believe in chemtrails. You're likely to be a Nazi, a cretin basically. You're likely to be just an amoeba, something at the bottom of a pond, according to James O'Brien. And now you're also likely to be somebody who hates the Polish and hates the Pakistanis. I didn't realise I was that bad of a human being. I don't know about you, dear listener. I thought I was fairly all right, really. I thought I was a relatively nice guy. Not perfect mind. The future Mrs. Allen would jump in there. She'd have a list as long as your arm of things that are wrong with me. But I thought I was relatively okay. You know. So now you're a racist as well.
That's very seductive as well. The more that's gone wrong in your life, the more seductive that becomes. But Vladimir Putin has one role and one role only.
What's that? I wonder what he's going to say. What is the role of Vladimir Putin
now in the Kremlin? And that is to sow dissent and division among what he sees as his foes in Europe, the European Union. America's done. He's got it. You know, there was an announcer on Russian television last night who said, shortly after Rex Tillerson made a comment in support of Britain condemning Russia, he was fired. And the newscaster said the words, Trump is ours. Trump is ours.
Yeah, but he knows, O'Brien knows that Russian newscasters are crazy fuckers. They're, you know, you think Kay Burley is mad. You think Nikki Campbell is mad. The Russian broadcasters are absolutely crazy. Doolally. Nutty as a box of frogs. They'll say anything. You had a guy on the news last week basically saying that Skripal deserved it. If in fact, you know, the Russian Secret Service agency did it. They're crazy. They'll say anything. These guys. And of course, the United States is not owned by Russia. It's owned by Israel. But James O'Brien won't say that because he's got no cojones, he's got no balls, he's got a 6-figure salary. And for his 6-figure salary, he will sit there and he will say what he's told to say. No courage, no heart, no balls. Anybody could do what James O'Brien is doing. I could do what he's doing 1,000 times better. Do you know how I know that? Because I used to do it. As you know, back in the day. That was me telling every people that a crazy bastard in the Tora Bora mountains carried off 9/11. Right? That was me. I was that guy. This guy's a real beauty, this James O'Brien, eh? They use this cretin sometimes to present Newsnight on BBC Two, although I don't think he's done it for a while. This is journalism in the UK in 2018. You're a racist, low-life scumbag, Sandy Hook hoaxer who believes in chemtrails, and you're a Nazi if you don't accept what we tell you to accept. If we tell you the Russians did it, you better believe it, or we're going to humiliate you. We're going to make you feel worthless. Hang on a second, Richie. You said O'Brien a few minutes ago was worthless. You shouldn't have said that. That's the pot calling the kettle black. But he is worthless as a human being, carrying on like this. This is not the conduct of a professional broadcaster. It is not the conduct of a decent human being. Right? What else does this?
On Russian television. And Putin will be watching that, knowing that there are loads and loads of people in America that are essentially on the same side as Putin now. Still surprises me that we have it in Britain. Still surprises me that we've allowed ourselves to be led by the nose.
Led by the nose. People are asking, why are we getting up every morning to go to work, James? Why are we switching on BBC Radio 4 and 5? We're switching on LBC, not too many people though. And we're switching on our local... We don't have local stations anymore. They've all been taken up, of course, by conglomerates. But why are we switching on Key 103 in Manchester? Why are we switching on radio stations in Liverpool? Why are we listening, James, every day to horror stories about Russia? Every day, James. Something's got to be wrong. A broken clock is right twice a day, James. So why is it every time I switch on the radio, the Russians are gassing people, they're helping Assad, the Russians are killing gay people in cities all around Russia. Putin is ordering the murders of Russian dissidents and exiles around the world. The Russians, the Russians, the Russians. The Russians, the Russians, the Russians, James. Who's on Putin's side here? People are just asking, pull the other one. We've been here before with Gaddafi, with Saddam Hussein, with various autocrat governments, regimes, whatever you want to call them, in Central America. We've been here before. The same shit. It's just a different day. That's what people are saying, James. I wonder are people like James O'Brien starting to worry now? I wonder, can they see what's coming? And I don't mean in terms of anything happening to them. I wouldn't wish any harm on O'Brien or anybody else. But I mean, are they worried about their own financial futures, their own status in the worlds that they've built around them? Can they see in the distance? Can they see the dust as the galloping tide comes towards them? As people stand up, as they wake up, as they shake their heads and they say, no, you fucking liar, no, I'm not believing it anymore. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being told to live in fear by people like you. I'm tired of people like you leading and cheerleading and demanding that we send our military overseas to bomb into fucking pieces the poorest people in the world. James, we're tired of it. I wonder, can he see that coming down the line? Is that why you get these frantic rubbish monologues? Senseless monologues, Sandy Hook, Nazis, chemtrails. Right? What else does he say?
Quite so blindly into a position where now, if I opened up the phone lines, there'd be success. And it does, I'm sorry to say this, because I appreciate that all of the clever, decent, educated people who voted to leave the European Union can't quite believe it. Sorry to say this, because I appreciate that all of the clever, decent... It surprises me that we've allowed...
The reason why I was rewinding that there, sorry about this, I didn't have time to edit this earlier on. It was a busy day with the encoding issues in the studio. Remember I said earlier on that when he opens his phone lines, pretty much ordinarily when he opens his phone lines, he is accosted by a listenership who mostly disagree with him. Well, he expresses frustration here. You know, if I open up the phone lines, basically I'm going to get it. This is really interesting.
To be led by the nose, quite so blindly into a position where now, if I opened up the phone lines, there'd be success. And it does, I'm sorry to say.
And then he stops himself. If I opened up the phone lines, there would be success. What he means is there would be a succession of callers basically ringing him up to say, you're talking through your arse, James. You see, he can see it coming down the line. LBC Radio can see it coming down the line. It's owned by Global. Bauer Media, which owns hundreds of stations, they can see it coming. People are switching off in their droves. And they're finding Fab Radio. They're finding the Richie Allen Show. They're finding other programs made by independent content creators who are not telling them, you're stupid, you're racist, you're a Nazi, you're an idiot. People are finding programs now with presenters whom are willing to listen to what they have to say and are willing to say, okay, you'd like me to speak to Barbara Honegger, would you? You'd like me to speak to Ray McGovern? Well, okay, I will facilitate that. Because LBC won't speak with Ray McGovern, which is an indictment of LBC's claimed impartiality. This is one of the most decorated CIA officers that has ever lived. A man who briefed Kennedy, who briefed Johnson, who briefed Ford, Carter, Reagan, and George H.W. Bush. So he's earned the rights to have an opinion on stuff. Right? But we can't have him on the radio, no. No, dear boy. Can't have our listeners listening to reasoned, measured, briefed, thought out analysis of what's going on in Russia, in Syria, and what's going on with the referendum result. Can't have that. We got to bring on the usual talking heads. And we allow presenters like O'Brien drone on forevermore with all of this, you're a racist bullshit. If you don't agree with us, you're a racist.
Sorry to say this, because I appreciate that all of the clever, decent, educated people who voted to leave the European Union can't quite believe who they've woken up in bed next to. But it is pretty much the more, how can we put this politely, thick as horse poo Brexit voters.
Yeah, people who voted for Brexit are thick as horse poo. There you are. You did something I don't agree with. You chose to vote in a democratic referendum where you were asked your opinion, yes or no, leave or don't leave or stay. You made your decision. I don't like it. You are thick as horse poo, says James O'Brien.
Who are coming down for Vladimir Putin. It makes very little sense until you see Brexit as, of course, a successful splintering of the European Union.
And here you go now. Now he's trying to say that Putin's end game here is to break up the European Union. And O'Brien is not the only commentator trying to draw a comparison between Russia being this dangerous, serious, terrible threat looming in the East, the same shit we heard for 50 years and it was untrue. Remember Donald Rumsfeld, when he was Defence Secretary in 1976 for the first time, was it 1975, under Ford? The Soviets have been busy, they've been busy. It was all lies. And it's all lies today. Now they're trying to say that leaving the European Union at this time, devastating, because we'll be weakening Europe against the ever-present threat of Red Russia, the murderers, the oligarchs, the murderers. James O'Brien, eh? Do we want to hear any more of this? Just a couple of seconds more.
Union that Vladimir Putin sees as a threat to his rule, because all of those former Soviet countries on the fringes of the European Union that sit, if you will, between us and them, the European Union, as it encourages them to embrace democracy, as it...
All right, the European Union is embracing former Soviet Union states to embrace democracy. Is that right, James? No, it's not. It's wrong. The European Union wants to adopt these countries into the Union so that those countries can be given loans by the European Central Bank, by the IMF, and those countries' backs. The spines of those countries can be broken in the same way that Ireland, Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal and all the rest of them are broken, so that everything of worth, everything of value, every state asset in those countries can be taken out, and that brutal austerity can be enforced on the peoples of those countries. James O'Brien. That's why the European Union wants to get these countries into the Union. O'Brien says the European Union wants to democratise these countries. We've had enough of James O'Brien.